Hello everyone, what's going on? Thank you for stopping by for another episode of Storytime. Welcome to episode 2 of our National Park stories. As many of you know, national parks are a great place to escape from the busy life and go camping or even sightseeing. But sometimes, those peaceful and wonderful moments can be interrupted by mysterious and sometimes even strange occurrences. What sorts of experiences will we have? Listen in and find out. Let's get started. Number 1. Okay, so I'm here today to share something with all of you that happened when I was in a national park. The thing is, I don't know exactly what it was or what happened, but I thought maybe you might know. Therefore, allow me to properly tell this story to all of you. This happened about 10 years ago, so it has been a while. Even so, I have a great memory, so I still remember the details. After all, you have something like this happen to you aren't going to forget. For some quick background on myself, I was 22 years old and I was attending the University of Arizona in Tucson. My life there was like any other college student. Studying, exams, projects, the usual. Well, one summer after finals were over, me and my girlfriend, who we will call Laura in this story, decided to go on a road trip. For this trip, we would go and visit her family that lives in Seattle, and we would spend a couple of weeks there. And though our destination was Seattle, we would find ourselves in a national park, hundreds of miles away. So, on a bright and early Saturday morning, me and my girlfriend get everything in our car, and we start our 4-day road trip to Seattle. The reason it was going to take us a few days was because we wanted to go and visit a national park in California. Since we're both in biology, we were always so fascinated with learning more about nature and trees, the different variety, the animals that roam around, all of it. Moving on, it did take us about 8 hours of driving, but eventually we do stop in a small town called Three Rivers. A lot of people usually will stop here, as it's not too far from the national park. This is where we found ourselves, spending the night until the following morning. On day number 2, our adventure into the national park was about to begin. That was, of course, before something strange happening. Me and Laura ended up waking up early to the sound of helicopters and sirens making their way down the road from us. Just so you know, it was around 4 in the morning. Both of us found it weird, especially considering we were right next to the woods, but we tried not to think about it too much. Regardless, we are now awake, even though our alarm wasn't supposed to go off until 6 in the morning. We figured why not, this would be a great way to catch the sunrise before the day got too warm. Anyways, with all of that said, let's fast forward to later that evening. Me and Laura have finally set up a campsite, and it's now around 8 p.m. Obviously the sun is already set. I remember we just sat there talking, listening to the sounds of crickets, while looking back at our pictures we took. I don't know how long after that it was, but both of us suddenly started hearing branches breaking, and even footsteps. Both of us sat down, so obviously it wasn't either of us. And suddenly, we are face to face with this older-looking gentleman. I want to say he was probably in his late 40s, wearing older-looking clothing, and he looked pretty dirty. He also had a backpack with him. At first, he just stared at us, and seemingly for longer than you would expect. It's like he hasn't seen anybody in a long time or something. After about 20 awkward seconds, he finally speaks up. Look, I need a quick favor. Do you have any food you could possibly share with me? I would really appreciate it. Right away, me and Laura had this really bad feeling about this, but not to escalate things, we did offer him some food. He now sat down on the other side of the campfire, and he ate a sandwich that we gave him. While that was happening, all I was trying to do was act calm. After all, it could have just been that he was another explorer out here. Maybe a little bit shy, but he seemed pretty cool. Because of this, I decided to talk to him for a little bit. So, what brings you out here? You must be like me and my girlfriend and enjoy the national park. This is actually the first time we've ever been here. Do you have any suggestions on where we could go? That was when he says, Look, I'm not here to talk to you. All you need to know is that I'm out here for reasons that you don't need to know about. Now, why don't you keep to yourself and let me finish this food? Wow, attitude much? I mean, we did offer him some food, didn't we? Anyways, I let him finish the food and he gets up to leave. Before leaving, he turns around and says one final time, "I'll admit, that was a really good sandwich. I think because of that, I'll let the two of you go. The two of you just aren't worth my time." And that was that. He ends up leaving and heading off into the wilderness. You can just imagine how confused we were right now. After all, being out there pretty much in the middle of nowhere and encountering this stranger definitely did make us a little bit more alert. One thing was for sure, it did make it difficult to sleep that night, and we almost considered leaving right there and then. Instead, we decided to brave the night and wait until the morning to leave. Well, that very night, I want to say around 3 in the morning, so about 5 hours after the encounter, me and my girlfriend are awoken to the sounds of footsteps once again. And unlike in the other stories where they circle around us, these ones just walk into the distance until eventually we are no longer able to hear them. Strange, we thought, but perhaps another group of campers. We ignore it. Suddenly, out of nowhere, we once again hear a familiar sound. Remember the helicopter from earlier in the morning the other day? We once again start hearing it approaching us, with again the sounds of sirens accompanying them. See, I forgot to mention, but we camped pretty close to a road that park rangers could use to get around the park. Both of us open the tent, and we reveal a series of vehicles racing down the road, heading further into the park. A few of them end up stopping down the road, and some officers stepped out. This is when I get out of the tent and I walk over to them. One of them sees me and he tells me, "Look, son, you need to leave right now. There's been an incident, and we need everybody to leave the area." That was weird. Obviously now I had more questions, but all he said was, "I'm sorry, but I can't tell you. If you need a ride back to town, we can take you, but right now, that's all I can say." Well, since I wasn't getting an answer, me and my girlfriend take the offer and we return back to the small town. Once we had returned, we are questioned on what we saw and if we saw anything suspicious. After that, they let us go and we proceed to spend the night in a small motel. So the following morning, we awoke, and I heard from some of the employees at the motel that they finally found somebody they'd been looking for. Apparently, he was said to be on the run for quite some time, after a series of incidents he was involved with. Instantly, I thought about the other night, and I remember what happened with the stranger. Regardless, I do my best to forget about it, and me and my girlfriend end up driving to Seattle. We were a bit nervous, but in the end I never did look more into it, so I don't know what came of it. Number 2. This happened a couple of summers ago, when I was volunteering at a park ranger station. You see, I was still in university at the time, and while I was in my final year, I was volunteering in a national park. Of course, being that I was here, you can imagine my ultimate goal was to work for the park ranger service. I am now, and although I've had some pretty interesting experiences, this one from when I was still a volunteer definitely got to me. So as a volunteer there, I would do pretty basic things. Either I would handle paperwork at the station, or even at times I would go with the park rangers, and we would drive around checking up on things. I always loved that part. It allowed me to escape from the endless paperwork, and it gave me the opportunity to see the park with my own eyes. See, I'd been camping here before when I was younger, but there were areas that were off limits. The main reasons being because the areas were lonesome, and there were also many animals out there. These were mainly mountain lions and bears, amongst other large animals. Trust me, the last thing you would want is to be camping out there and get visited by one of them. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't just be there to give you a friendly hug. Anyways, I remember one night in particular. By this point, I want to say it was around 8 p.m., and I was working on some paperwork at the front desk. I sat there minding my own business until one of the park rangers walked up to me and said, "Hey, that sure looks like a lot of fun. Must be nice doing paperwork." "Yeah, really funny there, David. Look, I'm trying to get this done. I can't talk right now, sorry." David was one of the employees who looked after the volunteers, In this case, I was the only one there. The other two volunteers were at home. He was a jokester, and we often played jokes on one another. Okay, all kidding aside, why don't you take a break from the paperwork and come join me? Besides, I need to go do the usual checkup, so if you want to join me, then you're more than welcome to. Of course I wanted to. After all, it's better than just working on a bunch of papers. I agree, and we start heading over to the vehicle, and now we would begin the nightly routine. The route starts off fairly basic. It goes down a few miles of barren dirt roads, then it turns into a set of woods. Finally, you head up a mountain trail until eventually you turn back around and head back to the station. It was about an hour ride, so it was pretty nice. After all, it was a cool 65 degrees out in September, so this was perfect. What wasn't perfect was the experience we would have about half an hour later. I'll get to that soon. So, like I said, the nightly routine begins. I recall both of us talking about the football game from the other night as we made our way down the first part of our journey. Once we reach the end of the flat dirt road, we take the opportunity to stop by a lake that was at the end of it. It was nice, and since the moonlight and stars reflected off the water's surface, it added to this overall bliss of being out in nature. Sure was better than doing what I was doing. We stood there looking at the lake, I want to say for about 5 minutes, when suddenly David receives a call on the radio. Weird, as it's Sunday and the park was pretty empty, but he answers it regardless, thinking it was John, our boss. Hey there, John, what's going on? Did you need something? Yeah, I need you to go check out the fairground area. You know the one. It's just beyond the mountain trail. It seems there's some campers up there, and they're saying they're hearing some strange sounds outside their tent. I told them to stay calm and said we would send somebody out there. Great, David said. It seemed like they didn't read the signs that said don't go past the fairground area. This was an area where the park had set up so people could camp. The area it seemed they were at was just beyond that, the part that was fenced. It's part of the park that we recommend people to stay out of. Obviously, since we didn't know what we were dealing with, David was going to take me back to the cabin, but I think even he realized that wasn't a good idea. So quickly, we get inside the vehicle and we make the 10-minute drive to where we think they are. Soon enough, we are able to see a light up in the distance, which we figured was the campfire. It was, and soon enough, we are welcomed with the sight of a lonely little tent. David then says, "Okay, we're here. We received your call. Is everything okay?" Out step out a young couple who looked like they'd just seen something. Well, it would soon be us seeing something, because as they're trying to explain what happened, we started hearing noises. That was when one of them told us that was the same sound they were hearing, and quickly they run over to our car and jump inside. Me and David were confused to what we were hearing, so we stepped forward a little bit, shining our spotlight into the nearby trees. I froze at what I see next. There, behind some trees, are a set of eyes. And no, before you think it was a person, it wasn't. I was now face to face with a mountain lion. I don't know about you, but standing right there staring at it, it seemed like time just stopped. I was feeling that at any moment the lion was just going to jump out. I finally realized what was going on when David yells out telling me to move. As fast as I could, I jumped right into the passenger seat, with David getting in the car soon after. It's now we're all face to face with two mountain lions as they're growling and scratching at our door. It's so weird, but for them to be acting this way was something we found bizarre. Sure, there have been stories of people's encounters with them, but for them to suddenly act this way, we just couldn't explain it. Looking back, we would like to think that perhaps we got in too close to their home and they were keeping a lookout for the kids. This is why we tell people not to come out here, but some people don't listen. Either way, we drive out of there with the young couple and we return back to the station. Obviously, both of them were shaken up, which was understandable, but I'm sure they were happy that we showed up when we did. After that night, we did return back to their campsite and we got their belongings, and that was that. We didn't encounter the mountain lions again, and soon after that I got hired full-time. Like I mentioned at the beginning, there were a few other instances, but I'll never forget that one. Number 3. Hey there everyone, it's me, the park ranger from the previous story. Remember how I said I had some other encounters and stories to tell? Well, I guess I'll go ahead and give you another one. It's funny, because looking back, it seems like I was the only one that had these experiences. Me and my friends laugh about it now, but in that moment, it was quite the shocking experience. As you know, I was volunteering for the park ranger service for a while, until finally, I was hired to work full-time. Once I was hired to be a park ranger, I moved on from the office work at the station, and now I did what you would normally expect. The once boring, uneventful days turned into driving around the park and helping people out whenever they needed anything. Of course, that didn't mean that there were times I did have to handle paperwork. Anyways, this takes place on a weekend when I had some time off. Now, normally, any person would choose to spend their time doing something else, like maybe going to an amusement park. But for me, I decided I wanted to go camping. Funny, considering I work pretty much in the woods every day. This time, however, I decided to bring my pet dog Albert with me to keep me company. After all, it gets pretty lonesome when you're pretty much in the middle of nowhere. Also, did I forget to mention I wasn't going to the same park? There was another park I wanted to go visit, but it was a few hours away from me. My cousins have gone there, and they've always told me about how beautiful it was. One of the reasons they recommended is they said there is this beautiful waterfall with a camping area right next to it. To me, it sounded like a great plan. So one mid-afternoon I leave my apartment, and me and Albert make the 45-minute drive to the park. With me I brought some extra food and supplies so we would have something for our time out there. Eventually we do arrive, and now I proceed to head over to the park ranger station. Once we arrived, I went ahead and introduced myself to them, and instantly, they welcomed me like I was part of their family. Hello there. It's nice to have another one of our brothers visiting us. I hope you enjoy your time out there. Let us know if you need anything. Yes, I was actually wondering. My cousins have been here before, and they told me about this waterfall with a camping area next to it. Any idea where I could find it? Of course. Here, take a look at this map. You just follow this trail for about 45 minutes and you should reach it. It's really only about 3 miles away. It's a pretty popular spot. Sweet. I thanked them for their help, and me and Albert proceeded to head down the trail they had mentioned. Another thing to mention was that it was around 5:30 p.m., and the evening was starting to approach us. Still, we had about 2 hours of sunlight left, so it gave me more than enough time to start a little campfire and set up the tent. Eventually, after walking down this trail, I started to hear what sounded like water. Sure enough, up ahead of me in the opening, I was able to see the waterfall I heard about. It was beautiful. The sounds of the water splashing down into the river, the birds singing, and the crickets just beginning to sing their nightly tunes. What better experience could I want? It's at this point I became aware of a tent up ahead of me. It seemed to feature a family camping. To be honest, I didn't want to camp near them, but when what I'm assuming was the dad saw me, he gives me a friendly hello and waves over to me. He seemed pretty friendly, so I walk on over and introduce myself. He tells me himself, his wife, and his son were spending the night camping out in the woods, and just like that, it seems like we connected. He was a biology professor, and he began telling me about all the things he was teaching. So while his son and Albert were playing, he helped me set up my campsite. All the meanwhile, we weren't knowing what was going to happen to us in a couple of hours. So after we ate dinner, I excused myself and we made our way over to my tent. A few hours passed by and it's now around 11 p.m. At this point, Albert was asleep next to me and I was taking the time to read my favorite book. Seemingly out of nowhere, I started hearing what sounds like what I first thought was a bear. I know I wasn't hearing a person because I instantly recognized the sounds. Well, as it turns out, I was correct. See, I had my lantern on, so I could see the shadows of movement on the outside of my tent. Sure enough, the outline of a bear forms, and that's when I froze. Suddenly, I started thinking about Albert waking up and making sudden noise. I didn't want him doing so and startling the bear. Trust me, if that happened, things might not have turned out so well. From where I sat, I can see as the shadow heads away from the tent. The footsteps are starting to get distant. Here's the thing. The footsteps aren't going back into the woods. Actually, it seems they're heading right on over to the other family's tent. That's when I immediately realized this could get bad. Surely by now they were asleep, and if they woke up startled, the bear might react. Finally, it seemed Albert woke up, and he started to growl. Better late than never, I guess. I tried to calm him down as I kept thinking about what to do. Do I step out of the tent and try to get the bear's attention, thus moving him away from the family? Or do I do nothing and hope he will leave? Either option had me sweating because we were dealing with an animal that was unpredictable. Just as I was about to act, I hear a yell from the other tent, and that's when I realized what was happening. I opened up my tent to reveal the bear was looking inside theirs. I guess they didn't close it properly. Immediately, Albert then goes running after it, barking like I've never heard him do before. With that, the bear turns around and goes off running into the woods. Eventually, Albert does return, but you can just imagine the look of concern on the family's face. As it turned out, the wife was still awake reading a book like me. That's when she also heard the movement. Well, one thing led to another, and she was soon face to face with her visitor. That was when she screamed, and that's when my dog reacted. Obviously, everybody was pretty shaken up, but we were just glad the bear decided to leave. Immediately, we called the park ranger station, and they sent a couple of them to come help us out. How ironic, the park ranger having to be saved by park rangers? Well, at least it gave me a story to tell my coworkers when I got back on Monday. So yes, that was the experience. I'd like to think that if it weren't for Albert chasing away our new friend, then chances are things might have turned out differently. By the way, I'm still pretty good friends with that family, and oftentimes they come and visit our park. Number 4. This happened to me and my sister a couple of years ago when we decided to spend a weekend rock climbing. I'll tell you right now, it was an experience like none other, and I'm so glad everything turned out okay in the end. If it's one word of advice I give people, always make sure to come prepared and expect the unexpected. With that said, we are both 22 years old, and we're both attending the same university in California. Seeing as spring break was fast approaching, me and my sister kept thinking about what we wanted to do for the week. Most of her friends were going to go to the beach and party, but we weren't really into that. We were more of the kind of sisters who enjoyed camping, or in this case, rock climbing. See, as an elective, we were taking a rock climbing course. Sure, it was only 1 credit, but it gave us an opportunity to do something fun. With that mindset, we decided to head out to Joshua Tree National Park. Sure, it's a few hours away from us, but it was definitely going to be worth the trip. For those unfamiliar with Joshua Tree, it's one of the most beautiful national parks you'll ever see. Actually, it's said that over 1 million people visit every single year. I know, right? I guess there's a lot of people who enjoy what we do. Another great part of it was rock climbing was pretty popular. There were different areas with a variety of difficulties, so it was perfect for us. With that background out of the way, let's fast forward to when we actually arrived, and the series of events that would take place. When we did arrive, we are welcomed by a couple of friendly park rangers. They give us a map and tell us to have a great time. A great way to start off a great adventure. And so, we start walking out into the wilderness. Our first stop was getting to an area called Yosemite Valley. It was a little further than what we were expecting to walk, but we've heard so many awesome stories about it. I'd say we were walking for about an hour, and we see a couple that was walking out of the valley. They greeted us and gave us a friendly hello, and they reminded us of the coyotes they had seen further ahead. They just told us to be careful and avoid a certain area, and that was that. They leave, and me and my sister walk a little bit more. Another 20 minutes go by, and we figured it's now time for lunch. I grab a couple of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches from my backpack, and I hand one over to my sister. While we sat there enjoying the view around us, we noticed some clouds forming up ahead of us. One look at them confirmed that they were rain clouds, and it was definitely turning more into a possibility that it might rain. That should have been our first sign to tell ourselves, you know what? Now might be a great time to head back home before the rain catches up to you. Just saying. That, of course, was the last thing on our mind. After all, I didn't want the drive to have been for nothing. We figured if it did rain, then we can just set up a tent and wait it out. After our quick lunch, we ended up walking another 30 minutes, and we finally reached Yosemite Valley, just like I mentioned. At this point in the park, cell phone reception was pretty spotty. Sometimes I would get a 1 bar, other times I would have no service. This plays an important role, by the way. Once we reached this rock climbing area, first thing was first. Let us make a quick little campsite, then we can climb. We now spend the next half hour setting up the tent, and eventually we even get a little campfire going. Luckily for us, we had supplies already prepared, so it didn't take us too long. By this point in the afternoon, it was around 4 p.m., and our goal was to climb to the top of this area and watch the sunset. With said sunset approaching, me and my sister grab our gear and we begin to climb up. As we're climbing, I almost lost my grip, but thankfully I was able to catch myself. One of us wouldn't be so lucky a little bit later. Finally, we reached the top of this small mountain area, and we sat there for about an hour, just enjoying the sunset and the view of the valley below us. As we're doing so, we are starting to notice the clouds are starting to cover the sky. Soon, we're welcomed with a light rain. Well, that was a bummer. There went our spot. Since there's no place to hide from the rain up here, we now decide to quickly make our way down, before the rain gets too heavy. Yes, I know, not the best idea. Here's the thing with rain. When there's water on a rocky surface, then it becomes slippery. This was something we didn't think about as we made our way down. I am almost certain you can imagine what happens next. Thankfully, we weren't far from the ground, but with one miscalculation, my sister loses her grip. And well, one thing led to another. Ouch. Thankfully for my sister, she didn't break anything, but she did sprain her leg. That would prove to be bad because it's raining, and here my sister is with a sprain. Quickly, I help her up and we make our way to the nearby tent. Once in there, I get the first aid kit and I do what I can to help her out. Obviously, in this situation, there wasn't much we could do, so my next idea was to call for help. Now, remember how I said the phone signal was kind of acting strange? Yeah, let's just say it wasn't cooperating this evening. I kept trying, but each time I would call, it wouldn't go through. Obviously, the only thing to do now was to wait out the rain, then I can see if I can go find a signal. I remember about half a mile away from us, there was a signal, so I figured that that's where I needed to go. I'll tell you, my sister was the bravest person I ever knew, and she handled the sprain like a champion. She told me she could wait, but of course I wanted to go out. But then again, it was raining. Finally, after about 20 minutes of rain, things finally seemed to have settled down, and it got quiet. I figured that now was the perfect opportunity to head out. With that, I get out of the tent, and I start to make my walk over. The good thing, I didn't have to go too far, because my call finally went through. Thank you, phone. Better late than never. One thing leads to another, and I give them our location. They told us they could be out there in about 40 minutes, and they just said to wait it out. I mean, there wasn't anything else we could do. With that, I returned back to my sister with the good news. For the next 30 to 40 minutes, me and my sister are telling stories and laughing when we soon hear something. The distinct howling of coyotes. Great, as if things couldn't get any worse. The good thing was that they didn't seem to be too close, and a few minutes after that, we can hear somebody calling out to us. It turned out to be the friendly two from earlier in the day, and together they helped us get our things in their car. In the end, when all was said and done, my sister got a cool cast, which of course I drew on. She even got a bunch of ice cream. How lucky. Number 5. Around 2002, I was working as a writer for a local newspaper. My job was fairly simple for the most part. I mainly wrote articles on events that took place in my small town, or would give people weekly segments about places to visit. I remember one time in particular, my boss told me to write an article about visiting national parks. That wasn't what excited me, though. What had me jumping for joy was the opportunity he was going to give me. He was going to give me an all-paid trip to a nice hotel so that I could go take some photographs at a national park. Finally, my dream was coming true. I wanted to go anyways, and now that I was going to be paid to go, what else could I possibly want? I'll tell you one thing, not what happened to me in my time there. See, what happened still remains unexplained, and I want to see if maybe somebody might have an answer. Once I arrived at the hotel, I spent a couple of days getting my laptop and supplies ready to go. Once done, I spent the day out in the park, taking pictures and checking out the sights. At around 4 p.m., it's now starting to get dark, and it was now time to leave. With me, I had quite the camera full of pictures, ready to send to my boss and write about them. I couldn't wait to write about the animals I saw, and even the people I interviewed. Speaking of people, going down the trail suddenly made me feel ill. I don't know, but it's like somebody was keeping a watchful eye on me. I just couldn't really figure out from where. I looked everywhere around me, but I hadn't seen anyone. I even called out saying, "Hello? Is anybody there?" And nothing. Not a single response back to me. Okay, so maybe my nerves were getting to me and I was just imagining things. Still, that couldn't explain away the sudden whispers coming from the woods. Yes, I'm not joking. I start hearing what sounded like people having a conversation. Note, I couldn't tell exactly what they were saying, but what I could understand was I could hear voices. In that moment, I happen to turn around, and I can see as a shadow moves just beyond a rock formation. I froze when I see this, because now the idea that I wasn't alone started to come up in my mind. Surely any normal person would come say hello, and they would let you know they're there, right? I didn't know what to think, but I wasn't going to stay around and find out. I do make it out of the woods, and I reach the park area where now I finally run into some people walking about. One of the security guards actually noticed me, and he walked over to me, wanting to know if everything was okay. Of course, I didn't think he would believe what I was going to tell him, but I'd do so anyways. The expression on his face definitely made it seem he was familiar with this story. Here's the thing about the woods. A lot of people say they see shadows or even sometimes hear voices. This area has a lot of history to it, so we recommend people go out in groups and not by themselves. Thanks for letting me know until after. Seriously, that wasn't what really got to me. What got to me was when I was writing up my articles and listening back to some of the stories I recorded. I remember at one point I was listening to a recording when I was able to hear what sounded like a message. It was in between one of the conversations I had with somebody, but honestly, it sounded like somebody saying, "Get out, now." That was one thing, but then of course, I still had the pictures to look at. As I looked back at a series of pictures, I was able to see this blue mist forming on the bottom of two of the photographs. Of course, it was possible it could have been the lighting, but I did have them examined, and they found out it wasn't the case. So yeah, those were my strange memories from the park. If you'd like, I can look for all the pictures and tapes. They're somewhere in my attic. It's just a matter of finding them. Welcome back. I'm guessing if you're hearing this message, then chances are you made it to the end of the video. Like always, I thank you so much for taking the time out of your life to join me on these audio adventures. Remember, if you would like to hear some more awesome stories like this, then stay tuned. I've got plenty more on the way. Also, in case you're new around here or you want to catch up on the old videos, then make sure to check out the videos I have up. I have an awesome variety that I know you're going to love. But with that, my friends, today's stories come to a close. I hope to see you next time, but until then, take care and have yourself an amazing day.